2022 had a lot of ups and downs for the video game industry. While overall revenue was down 6 to 10% over 2021, there are now approximately 3.2 billion gamers on the planet, which technically makes us one of the largest demographics on Earth. Only slightly smaller than the total number of people who have promised themselves that they're getting back into shape starting in January. The adult games industry has actually had modest revenue growth with almost 1,300 new games released on Steam, up 8.4% over last year's numbers, which is awesome. This year we're going to look at 59 titles broken into 5 tiers. That includes the 4 tiers from last year, Bronze, Silver, Gold, and Platinum, plus a new tier, Copper, representing games that are great but not the best, like Asmongold or Orange Fanta. As with the previous year's list, because Steam doesn't release sales figures, I use a bunch of variables to calculate a game's popularity. This includes the rating based on player reviews, the number of reviews, a game's average and peak concurrent player numbers, as well as the total number of followers a game has. I've also factored in games that were not originally classified as adult content by Steam, but had patches or DLC to restore intended gameplay. To be eligible, a game had to release on Steam between December 1st, 2021 and November 30th, 2022. As always, all links can be found in order for free on my Patreon, because YouTube hates fun almost as much as Gabe Newell hates catgirls. First up is the Orange Fanta tier, and one of the prettiest games on this year's list, Countess and Crimson. I first reviewed this occult-themed eldritch horror game back in May. In it, your car breaks down and you and your girlfriend are stranded in a medieval village in the Carpathian Mountains. Will you escape with your humanity intact, or will you succumb to the forces of demonic seduction? Continuing with pretty games, we have Honey Select 2 Libido DX. This is the latest customizable character creation simulator from Illusion. Given how many games have been made using Illusion's other assets from the original Honey Select and Koikatsu, I'm really looking forward to seeing what developers will accomplish here. Just make sure to download the optional patches to be able to experience all the features and community mods. Our next title, The Heart of Darkness, is a Dark Souls-inspired dungeon dive from Kagura Games. A wave of darkness has covered the kingdom of Halyard, and you are tasked with expelling it. You have the choice of 5 different origins, each with their own unique skills and abilities to use in this turn-based RPG. As with most Kagura games, the content patch is available on their website. Next on our list is another title by Kagura Games, The Imperial Gatekeeper. This is basically Papers, Please in a fantasy kingdom with more, let's call it stringent search and seizure policies. This is actually one of a wave of games being brought to Steam that started on the Japanese website DL site, which I'm thinking about adding to the review rotation alongside Steam, Patreon, and itch.io. So let me know if you think that's a good idea or not. Our first college harem themed game on this year's list is Dreamland. This is Spring Break meets a suspense mystery, so at least this is something different from the standard format. Currently, this game is scheduled to take place over 1 week with episodic DLC releases broken into chapters. The base game is free, but I'd expect that at least some of the additional content will cost money. Next up is Beautiful Mystic Defenders. This is a tower defense style game with RPG and leveling mechanics. Most of the interactions take place between levels and objectives, but this does feel a little deeper than most mobile-style versions of this genre. I first covered our next title, Chevalier Histoire, back in March. This is a Zelda-style action RPG where you play as a female protagonist. There is already DLC available, Chevalier Histoire Append, in addition to the content patch available on Kagura Games' website. While the number of puzzle games released on Steam have gone down, there are still a few that are popular enough to make this year's list. Horny Wars is Yuri and Monster Girl themed, and it also includes an octopus for those who want to get down with Ultros. So, Bound by Love is the 4th title on this list by Kagura Games. And by now, some of you may be like, what the hell, Annie? No, I'm not sponsored by them or anyone else, and as many of you know, I don't even accept keys or private builds from developers. What is happening here is that there are a lot of good games from DL's site that have come out over the last 4 or 5 years, and we're seeing many of them come over to Steam now, and Kagura is responsible for a lot of the translations and ports. Like this dark romance, sort of romance, twisted romance? Yeah, let's go with that. So, like this Twisted Dark Romance came out in 2020 on DL's site and is just now being released on Steam. So we should expect more ports like this over the next year until things are caught up. I'm really not sure how to describe our next title, Devil's Dungeon. I guess calling this a cross between Dig Dug and Bullet Hell is the closest I can think of. Let me know if you can think of a better description. So, you're the Demon King and you want to defend yourself from invaders, and if you're lucky, capture a few to unlock various interactions. And our final game in the Orange Fanta tier is Between Two Worlds. This visual novel juxtaposes a fantasy world in parallel with our modern one, and it's pretty fun for people who like tabletop RPGs. Oh no. Does that mean that D&D is going to claim ownership of this product too? Well, until then. This game is about halfway through a planned 12 chapters and already has more content than most similarly themed visual novels on Steam. Next up is the Bronze tier and our first game, Tame It. And I can safely say that this title is one of the most creative games on this year's list. I mean, you have to teach a cat girl how to speak using emojis. The tech demo for the sequel, Tame It 2, is now up on Steam as well if you want to check it out. Our next title, Ghost Marriage Matchmaking, requires you to get two ghost girls, ghost married. I feel like this is just one of those cultural translation issues, and I'm sure that this makes way more sense in context. But this title is pretty fun with mini games as well as strategy and RPG mechanics, in addition to the expected, ghost busting. So the format I use to rank games does seem to vet out most budget games, but some are universally popular enough to make it on the list. Like our next title, Blackjack and Waifus. As can be discerned from this title, you play blackjack with potential waifus, and if you win, well, some of the games on this list have really deep and meaningful plots or inventive gameplay mechanics. That is not what we're dealing with here. Our next title is the romantic comedy Nin Nin Days 2, where you try to win love with two ninja girls in Akihabara. Having been to Akihabara recently, I can safely say that there were no ninjas. Lots of amazing adult games and way too many girls for the various maid cafes freezing on the sidewalk, but the footage from that part of the trip is probably only going to be on Patreon. Sorry about that, but blame YouTube. Now that I think about it, maybe there were ninjas, but they were just so good at their job that I never noticed them as I explored the various cat and video game cafes. Obviously, this game is totally realistic, and it is very important that the next time you meet a pair of hungry ninja girls, make sure to buy them dinner. Next up is H Isekai Loves, which is basically a harem-building version of Puzzle Quest. This is one of the better puzzle games to come out this year, so if you enjoy this genre, then pick this one up. In our next title, Idle Hands, you help a disgraced pop star rebuild her career. As to the path that you take, you are given a wide range of options to gain fame, but surprisingly, the most effective strategy, work with Amazon to exploit children who are watching your Twitch streams, didn't make the list. Maybe that will come out in a DLC. I covered our next title, Mistwood Manor, back in October, and I really thought it would have ranked higher. This is a hotel management game crossed with a supernatural mystery, and the story was actually a lot of fun for me. This is from the same developer that made Man of the House, but it is way less grindy if you want to give it a shot. Next up is Latex Dungeon. This is one of those female protagonist games that focuses on corruption and transformation. Let's be honest though, that is most female protagonist games currently in our space. And yes, this year I am going to finally release a video focusing on female protagonist games and what flavors are most popular with women, but I'm pretty sure that it is not going to be what many of you expect. Spoilers. Our next title, Sexy Mystic Survivors, came out in November and would have absolutely ranked higher given enough time. This is a really well-polished bullet hell fantasy game with RPG mechanics. It is in early access, so if you are one of the many fans of this game, don't worry, it will get a second chance on this list in the year that it releases. And our final title in the bronze tier is Elf World Adventure Part 1. This is an isekai puzzle adventure that at first glance seems underwhelming, but I'm pretty sure this game is popular because the art is so pretty. Onward to the silver tier, and our first game is Didnapper 2. This is a female protagonist fantasy RPG that explores the bondage theme. Think playing as Princess Peach, but you have to save yourself. Why did this game make the list? I guess people just found it arresting. In our next title, Dream Hacker, you basically inception your way to romance through the use of a dream machine. This game has puzzle and training mechanics combined with good art and animations. I think this is one of those situations where the flavors covered in this title are a bigger draw than the actual gameplay, but that does seem very common in this industry. Our next game, Sex and the Furry Teddy 2 Sins of the City, takes puzzles and furries and now adds the college flavor as well. The funny thing is that I think this series started as a joke, but the animations and voicing are really great for those people who love these flavors. And there are a lot of people who love these flavors. If you don't believe me, then just post online that monster girls and furry are the same thing. Next up is Incubus. This is a pretty standard romance the girls in 30 days style dating simulator. But the biggest difference is that our male protagonist is being assisted by an incubus. This raises so many questions for me about the nature and role of the various sex demons, but I suppose I may be thinking too deeply about this. The game is pretty and is a decent take on a familiar theme. The first specifically male homosexual flavored game on this year's list is Chardonnay Romancia, which as you can see also happens to be entirely furry focused. Otherwise, this is a more standard story-driven visual novel experience. Our next title, Zetria, is a Metroidvania-style platformer. You're basically playing as Samus, but having way more fun than Nintendo would ever allow. I really thought things would be different under Doug Bowser, but so far there have been 0 princess kidnappings. However, Bowser has managed to eliminate Mario and replace him with a pod person. Next up is Furry Love 2. Why is the silver tier filled with furry games this year? I have no idea. But the better question may be, why are most of these furry titles puzzle games? This is probably another of those the art is driving the situations, because some of the hand-drawn art is really, really good in this game. So when our next game, Secret Summer, began development in 2019, the main characters were actually a pair of twins. Sadly, the final version of this prodigal son returning to their family visual novel only has one main character. Obviously, the developer, Superwriter, missed the opportunity to have one twin devour the other to become a genetic chimera. We could have had a supernatural horror game in addition to the prototypical cohabitation harem. Such a missed opportunity. I reviewed Lost Academy Season 1 back in July, and I got a ton of pushback for talking about Harry Potter. I mean, wow. This game is basically a parody, but I guess that is even too close to the Dark Lord Rowling for many people's comfort. Which is too bad, because this is a really fun and solid college-themed experience that is unique enough to differentiate itself from all the other college harem games on the market. One of the more adorable games on this year's list is Lily Navigation. This is a turn-based RPG with a female protagonist who happens to use the power of dowsing to help people. Basically a magical metal detector that can find things. Okay, our next title, Hand Simulator Rendezvous, isn't really a game, but it does have multiplayer co-op. So there's a lot of touching, and as you can probably tell from the dinosaur, there are no clothes. This feels gimmicky, but people really seem to like it. The first thing I did when I saw our next title, I Got a Millenary Cat, was look up what millenary meant. It just means 1,000, because the stray cat that you rescue is actually a 1,000-year-old cat spirit. I mean, obviously. This is a more casual experience with minigames and some management. If you do try this game, I highly recommend using a controller. I reviewed our final silver tier title, Tales from the Unending Void Season 1, back in May, and this was one of my favorite games of 2022. This sci-fi visual novel from the creator of Apple's favorite game, Sisterly Lust, has a great plot and almost every relationship and flavor is optional. That really gives players a lot of control in the type of game they experience. Now we're going into the gold tier, and our first title, Being a Dick Season 2, is the first DLC to Steam's top game of 2020, Being a Dick. Now, for most developers, the popularity and sales of this first expansion would be seen as a success. But given the explosive popularity of the original, this is a bit of a disappointment. Fortunately, Season 3 is on its way, and we'll just have to wait and see how well that one does. Our next title, Furry Shades of Gay 2, A Shade Gayer, is from the same developer as Sex and the Furry Teddy 2, Sins of the City. This is basically the same game with male homosexual content in place of male heterosexual scenes. Arguably, the stories are a little better in this one too, but I'll leave that up to those of you who want to try it out to decide. I actually have a full review of Prince of Suburbia Part 1 that I just never released when it came out in May, because I was trying to deal with my mom's cancer. There are actually still a ton of unreleased videos. Sorry about that. This is actually a great game if you enjoy hand-drawn art, cohabitational harems, and a more linear visual novel progression. Speaking of unreleased videos from last spring, I finally released the review of Escape Dungeon 2 back in November. This is a female protagonist roguelite dungeon delve. There is a sex on defeat mechanic that you can bypass if you beat enough of the various monsters in your multiple playthroughs. I find some titles more amusing than others, and Robin Morningwood Adventure is definitely high on my list of favorites. This is a male homosexual comedic adventure that focuses on the bara, big and muscular flavor. The mini games are fun and the art is great for those who enjoy these flavors. So when I reviewed Orc Massage early in 2022, I really thought it was going to be a contender for Game of the Year. I think if there had been more updates, then there would have been a chance. Fortunately, this game is still in early access and could eventually become a monster massage masterpiece. Now we come to what is possibly the prettiest game of 2022, The Divine Speaker. The story in this male homosexual fantasy adventure is great and the art is amazing. Definitely check this one out if you enjoy the yaoi flavor. I covered our next title, Chasing Sunsets, back in November, and this is one of the better romantic visual novels to come out in 2022. While not the best, you're allowed to wait for the platinum tier for that one, it still has a great story with compelling characters. Well, as compelling as you can get when our male protagonist is a billionaire Mary Sue. I really want to do a full review of our next title, The Price of Flesh, but so far I have been too scared to review this psychological horror fest. Seriously, the content warning is really extensive. Maybe playing this will be a New Year's resolution for me to totally follow through on. On to our next title, Lust Theory Season 1. I first reviewed this back in the summer, and all you really need to know is that this is Groundhog Day, the game. It does probably help to know that the renders and animations are great and there is full voicing. So for me, all I needed to know to want to play this was that my day kept repeating. Well, it repeats until small things start to happen. Spoilers. So here I was browsing games in Akihabara when I came across the collector's edition of our next title, Mina's Blood Hollow International. Sadly, I did not pick it up because it was huge and I had no way to carry it on my way to dinner. I reviewed this tentacle-filled strategy RPG back in March, and if I'm lucky, that collector's edition will still be waiting for me next time I make it to Japan. I could have sworn that I already released the review of our next title, Tuition Academia. I guess not, but expect to see my video on this parody of My Hero Academia soon. In the meantime, this female protagonist dating sim has great hand-drawn art and multiple relationships and endings to choose from. When you look at as many games as I do, patterns start to emerge. And it seems to be that if you want to make a successful catgirl game, the most important factor is the art. With Cat's Kiss, our male protagonist has to help a young woman who has been cursed into cat form. And before I get all the angry messages about that not actually being a curse, take it up with the developer. I'm pretty sure that the developer of our next title, You Crossing Animals, was playing Don't Starve one day and they were like, do you know what would make this game better? A town full of furries. Oh yeah, and robots. The game has voicing and is completely free to play for those who are looking to fly their furry flag. Have you ever wanted to play a male protagonist dating sim where the romanceable character was a woman who kidnaps you? Say no more, my femdom fam. Happiness Double Room has introduced me to a new flavor classification, Stockholm Syndrome. Seriously though, this game hits unexpectedly and is actually, I don't want to spoil anything. Our next title, House Party, finally released out of early access on Steam. This is probably the game that has made the most money on Steam of this list, as it has been out for years and in development since 2016, but technically this party simulator officially came out this summer. I covered our final title of the gold tier, After the Inferno, in November, and I was surprised at how much pushback I got for this fantasy harem adventure being a free game. Not fake free with microtransactions, just free. This was a project funded on Patreon that released the completed game for free on Steam. I think that's awesome. And if you feel the developer should be rewarded, then absolutely contribute by joining their Patreon. How we engage with creators will shape how our space continues to grow. And here we are at the Platinum tier. Not only was every one of these games commercially successful, they also had almost universal acclaim when it came to player reviews. First up is Quickie, a love hotel story. This hotel management dating sim was one of my favorite games this year. The hand-drawn art and animations are great. The story is fun and I love the lighthearted funky Persona 5 vibe that permeates this game. Since my review in the spring, there have been a bunch of updates and I'm really excited to see Quickie's final form once it leaves early access. Our next title, Magical Girl Celesphenia, is a fantastic take on the magical girl genre. Think La Blue Girl meets Madoka, just with older characters and less decapitations. This is a corruption-focused game, but then I would argue that the entire magical girl trope is intrinsically tied to corruption. But that would be a whole other video. Oh yeah, while I'm at it, I think Gundam should also be classified as part of the magical girl trope. But I only realized it recently while watching Witch from Mercury. I get requests for reviews all the time, which I try really hard to fulfill. My most requested review in 2022 was absolutely Karen's Prison. This female protagonist corruption-themed prison management RPG was one of the most popular games of 2022. However, given the content of this title, it was hard to find 20 seconds of usable footage, let alone 3 or 4 minutes it would take for a regular review. Unless, of course, you all just want me to draw a dinosaur in a prison uniform. There were a lot of dating sims on this year's list. Like, there is still one more to cover after our next title, Her New Memory. Why is this one so popular? I think it's a combination of pretty art and animations, plus the ability to customize your romantic interest. So while making this year's list, I discovered a flaw with how I include games. To qualify for the list, you have to release on Steam as early access or as a completed version. So what happens when my game of the year for 2021, Treasure of Nadia, releases early access on Steam in November and then releases fully a few months later in 2022? I was really sweating this outcome. I mean, how dumb would I feel if the most popular new Steam game of 2021 was also the most popular new Steam game of 2022? Fortunately, that didn't come to pass. But Treasure of Nadia is still an amazing game, so go check it out if you haven't already. There are many titles on this list that hit hard emotionally, but Leap of Faith may hit the hardest. If you love story-driven visual novels, then this is the must-play game from 2022. Just be warned, and remember that sometimes life is more about the journey than it is about the destination. From one of the saddest games on this year's list, we go to one of the most comical. In Kaiju Princess, you have to romance a giant city-destroying monster girl. You are literally burning towns by moonlight and winning love by daylight. Part dating sim, part trainer, part management game, all while channeling some type of manic Katamari Damacy vibes. Definitely give this one a try. And finally, the most popular new Steam game of 2022 is Fresh Women. This college harem visual novel released in August and had over 7,000 reviews in less than 3 months. To put that in perspective, Being a Dick has only 8,000 reviews after being out for almost 3 years. Fresh Women also has one of the highest review scores ever for an adult content game. So yeah, this game is very, very popular. This goes to show that a game's flavor combination is the most important criteria when people choose what to play. Genre is important, art and animation is vital, but if you don't like the flavors that a game has, you are likely never going to give it a shot. And that's great news for aspiring developers. Yeah, you may not make the most popular game, but if you have the right combination of your favorite flavors, there will still be an audience here waiting to try your game. How else could we explain why there are so many successful furry titles? There you have it. This is the 3rd year that I have done this list, and this is by far the most diverse selection of flavors, genres, and gameplay types that I've ever covered. I can't wait to see what's in store for 2023. I'd love to know what your favorite new Steam game of 2022 was, and what you're most looking forward to in 2023 as well. I am so excited about the lineup of Steam titles that are already scheduled to release in 2023. And I'm so thankful that you all have given me the opportunity to share this journey with you. It doesn't matter what game or genre makes it to the number 1 this upcoming year, because I'm sure there's going to be something that comes out for everyone. Seriously though, we all know that number 1 is going to be another harem game. Until next time, no shaming, just gaming. Thanks to all this month's support on Patreon. I wouldn't have been able to do this without you all.